welcome. I'm so excited to be here and a little nervous. This is my first video. And I immediately forgot to introduce myself. My name's Bridget and I'm a licensed therapist. I have a master's degree in art therapy and I'm a certified expressive arts therapist. Now, where were we? Maybe you're already an art therapist, or perhaps you're someone who would like to start using creativity in your work with clients. Or maybe you're just a person who wants to do more creative things for yourself. Everything that I share are things that I do for fun as an artist myself. Starting with today's activity, which is one of my absolute favorite things that I have been doing. I started this process of gathering natural materials and combining them with collage materials. So who are Nature Assemblage Collages for? I would say all ages, but probably at least 5. So 5 and up, and for the younger kids, you're definitely going to need some adult supervision because we're out in nature, we're gathering things, we're assembling things. You're going to need some hand-eye coordination, some fine motor skills. So I would say 5 and up. But really all ages, and never rule out that art therapy is extraordinarily effective for adults. Do not be misled into thinking that art therapy is only for kids. It is absolutely not. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So I want to start with the basics for those of you who might not be familiar with what I mean when I say collage. Collage is just the process of either ripping out or cutting out images of all sorts from magazines, newspapers, and assembling them typically on a piece of paper or some kind of a board. Typically you would glue them down or tape them down. Collage is something that often feels very non-intimidating for clients that we might have who tend to think that they're not creative or they're not artists. Collage is kind of an easy way in because these images that you'll find again in magazines or newspapers, they already exist. You don't have to create them. All you have to do is cut them out or rip them out and then, assemble them in a way that is pleasing to your eye. And the more you do it, I think the more your aesthetic will become your own. So collage is a good starting place for someone who feels intimidated by the creative process. Let's talk about the nature aspect. Same thing. The pieces that you're going to find in nature, they already exist. They are all around you. I mean, how cool. So that leads me to step 1. So step 1, you're going to want to get outside and collect your natural materials. And so I'm going to show you some examples. Now, I actually have been traveling around and living in Mexico for the last few years. And so I bring big Ziploc bags with me wherever I go. And these come with me in my suitcase. And I'm gathering my materials to use in my assemblages. So I have the bigger pieces, I have sort of smaller pieces, and I just carry these with me anywhere. But so step 1, you're going to want to get outside and gather your materials and look for just anything that catches your eye. I have a bunch of dried wildflowers. I have leaves, I have sticks, stones, shells, feathers, you name it, the world sort of becomes your canvas and everything is a potential art material. And so I'm just kind of showing you some of the things in my Ziplocs these days. Work with what you have, work with what is in your backyard. We want to be respectful of nature. I'm looking around to see what nature has left for me. What is already there, what has already dropped from the tree. And you'll often get really lucky. So I need to bring in that piece of just be mindful about what you're gathering. So step number 1, you're going to gather. Okay, step number 2, now that you have your natural materials, you're going to want to gather your collage materials. So again, for me, because I travel and I'm traveling, I carry a bunch of things around in big envelopes and smaller envelopes, and that's an important piece. Try to gather larger collage pieces and then smaller collage pieces, because you're going to want to have the different sizes to work with. What are you drawn to? What feels good to you? What catches your eye? Because you're learning about you. So pay attention to the colors that speak to you, to the textures, the imagery. Local tourism magazines are great. They are free. And so I use maps, I use tourism magazines, I use free magazines, I pay for magazines, I use newspapers. Like, everything to me now becomes, again, a possible art material. Calendars and any kind of printed material. So, this isn't rocket science, but just kind of explaining to those who this might be new to. So you want big materials, and then you want smaller pieces. I did also want to say that it's up to you. I really actually love, especially when I'm working with bigger pieces, ripping them out as opposed to cutting. So it's up to you. If you want something that's a little rougher around the edges, literally, you can tear things. You don't have to do the intricate, detailed cutting unless you want to. But I have all of my smaller pieces, and again, I'm going to keep going back to pay attention to what you are drawn to, and pay attention to how it feels in your body. This whole process is really one of being present in the moment, because it requires your attention to every piece. You can't really mindlessly do this, I would say, meaning that you have to be pretty mindful. And that is, as we all know, incredibly therapeutic. We've done step number 1, we've collected our natural materials. We've done step number 2, we've collected our big collage and our small collage and our words. I did want to mention one more thing, because I'm eyeing this over here. I also collect paper. This is wrapping paper that I thought was so beautiful. Wallpaper, whatever kind of paper. Okay, so step number 3, we need our surface that we're going to create our assemblage on, and that becomes our background. So for me, I don't always fill my entire space, and so if that background's going to show, then I want to be cognizant of what color, texture, what the aesthetic of the background is. And so this is totally up to your preference, but make sure you have something that's sturdy. You don't want something that's bendable. I tend to use a nice sturdy piece of like a drawing board or a particle board, and I like something that is a more natural earth tone, or you might have something like that lying around. As far as size, this is also up to your preference, but I would say, if you're working with clients, especially younger kids, it's harder to work small. So you might want something 18 by 24. You might even want to do a circle. That's different, sort of a mandala. So secure some kind of non-flexible, non-bendy board. Okay, so step number 4 is the fun part. And what I didn't mention, this is an aspect to this process that is different, and there's a therapeutic reason behind it. These are actually not going to be glued down or taped down in any way, and they are not permanent pieces. These are pieces that actually get disassembled. They are temporary. And that can be tricky. So it is kind of a practice in letting go. So for now, we're going to start assembling. And what I would recommend as far as the assemblage process is to start with one focal point and start with an image that really catches your eye and build everything around that. Is there a certain image that wants to be seen right now? Is there a certain, maybe it's a word that is calling your attention, that wants to be your focal point, a word, a text. I would pay attention to, again, this process is about self-knowledge in a way. What am I drawn to? This can help clients who struggle with identity, who struggle perhaps with self-esteem issues, with having a sense of self, with knowing their preference, with knowing what they like and what they don't like. But if you lay out the images and ask your client to identify, what do you like? This is their chance to create something that they have control over. So this is an opportunity for them to assert and have some agency over what they are drawn to. This is going to be my focal point. And so you'll want to put that down on your board and start assembling around it. And this is a process that can take you as long as it needs to take you. If you are working with clients and you see them weekly, this can be an ongoing process, and let it go for as long as it needs to. And so that is step number 5. You are assembling. Okay, so when you feel like you've arrived at a place for you or your client, depending on who's doing this, where your piece feels complete to you, then step number 6 is to reflect on it. When we're doing art therapy or expressive arts therapy, you're working on a lot through process, and that can be enough. The act of creating in itself is revealing, it's therapeutic, it's all the things that we've kind of been talking about. However, you can always offer your client the opportunity to engage with the piece or reflect on it in a way that might be even more revealing or be even more healing. And so what I like to do is if my piece doesn't already have a word in it somewhere, I will then sort of look at the piece and I'll find a word. So reflect on a theme or a title would be step number 6. A step number 7 would then be, and this is, like I said before, if the client is willing and if it feels appropriate, have your client do a little bit of what we would call an art therapy or expressive arts therapy, like dialoguing with the piece. For example, some questions to ask might be, does this piece have a message for you? And what do you feel like that message is? But is there something in the piece that stands out to you? If you could say something to your piece, what would you say? Do you have a message for it? You could always ask, if you were to put yourself in the piece, where would you be and why? And step number 8 is an optional step, but it's something that I find I always do. The first component would be to photograph the piece and then to disassemble it and to bring things back to nature if that feels right. So play with that. See what feels right in the process of disassembling. It's the letting go process. So that's it. Thank you so much for staying with me for this 8-part process. I would love to know if you do this, how it goes for you. And something important that as art therapists we always say is that you can't ask clients to do something that you haven't done yourself. So before you try this with a client, be sure to try it with yourself first and see how it goes. And I would love to hear. Stay tuned for more, and I'll see you next time. Bye.